All right, Alexander, let's do an update on what is happening with Ukraine, and we can talk about what's going on the front lines. Zelensky's trip to Sumy to inspect the fortifications, the Surovikin line, I guess you could say, and yeah, well, and we can talk about the push by the collective West to seize, not freeze, the interest, the profits on the Russian frozen assets, because we haven't got to the actual 300 billion. They're still trying to figure out a way to get to the 5.5 billion. And I think that we can talk about the Crocus City Hall terror attacks as we discuss Ukraine, because everything points to the fact that, I guess you could say fact, that the Putin administration is looking at some sort of Ukraine involvement in the Crocus City Hall terrorist attacks. That's the way things look. If you go by the statements from the FSB director, from Medvedev, from Putin, from Peskov, from Maria Zakharova, they are strongly indicating that there may be some sort of Ukrainian involvement, whatever that entails. Anyway, where do you want to start off from?
I think we should start with the Crocus City Hall, because this is the story that dominates news still in Russia. It hangs over everything. It hangs over Ukraine as well. The Ukrainians are very nervous about this. Now, we've seen Alexei Danilov, who is the head of Ukraine, was the head of Ukraine's National Security and Defense Council, their chief intelligence officer. He's suddenly been dismissed, resigned, you name it, I don't know what it is, but he's been there for a long time, and suddenly he's gone. And he's going to become an ambassador. Before long, the entire Ukrainian government will be holding ambassadorships in various nice European countries. And, bear in mind, this does get all of these people out of the way, so that if things really do turn horrid in Ukraine, which we'll come to eventually in this program, then of course they're already comfortably in the West. So just saying all of this. But anyway, he's been an enormously confrontational, belligerent, aggressively spoken official within the Ukrainian government, even by the standards of Ukrainian officials. He's been aggressively spoken. And we've also had an interview from Budanov. He says, no way was Ukraine in any way involved in the Crocus City Hall. And by the way, he doesn't approve of terrorist acts. And he said that. I mean, this is something that, he only believes, he believes that Ukraine should only focus on military targets. Now, this just a few hours after the head of the SBU, which is the much bigger internal intelligence agency, came out and said, well, actually, Ukraine has been involved in killing all kinds of people in Russia, people like, Tatarsky and Dugina and others. And of course, we've had the Kerch Bridge attack. We've had, all sorts of episodes of that kind. So there's some kind of disarray in Kiev. Now, one mustn't overanalyze this, because we don't know exactly what's going on. And in the case of Danilov, he did say some spectacularly rude things a few days ago about a top Chinese official, Li Hui, who has been visiting Ukraine and trying to get the Ukrainians to, sit down with the Russians and start thinking more realistically about things. And it could be that that's the single thing that finally caused Zelensky to sack him. But the timing does look odd. Danilov has been an important figure in the Ukrainian government. A strong apology probably would have sufficed to appease the Chinese. It does seem a bit strange that he would go now. I think what the Ukrainians are trying to do is that they're trying to put themselves as much distance between themselves and the Crocus City Hall episode as they can. So Danilov is being sent off to Norway. he's probably, because he is he was Zelensky's national security advisor. He basically supervised the work of the intelligence agencies. He's a very hardline person. So, we've had the statement from the head of the SBU. We've had the statement from Budanov. The Ukrainians are trying to tell everybody, perhaps tell the Russians, look, we've turned a new leaf. This isn't the kind of thing we're going to be doing anymore. We accept that it was, perhaps we went a bit too far. And please believe us, please trust us. We didn't have anything to do with Crocus City Hall. So that's what I think the Ukrainians are trying to do. And that's, I think, the reason for all this confusion and disarray coming out of Kiev. Now, I think that there are 3 points to make about Crocus City Hall. The first is that, going back to that famous American warning, I don't know how much weight to put on this, but let me reiterate again a point which no one in the media in the West is making, no Western official is making, which is that warning only covered a 48-hour period at the beginning of March, or rather the second week of March. This attack took place several weeks later. So we don't quite know what information the Americans were passing on to the Russians or what information the Americans had. But on its face, that warning did not cover the period of the Crocus City Hall attack. Now, I know there are some people in Moscow who said that who are saying now there was an element of misdirection about this warning, and that it was partly intended to provide another alibi. I'm not saying this is true. I'm just mentioning that this is what is being said. That's the first thing. The second is that, as we've discussed in previous programs, these 4 gunmen tried to escape in the direction of Ukraine. There's been a lot of confusion about this, but I think that is indisputable. Apparently, the place where they were captured has been geolocated. It is fairly close to the border of Ukraine. The people, the armed police who were trying to pursue and track down these people had clearly been given orders to take these people alive. That perhaps explains why we see them all looking a bit roughed up after they've been presented at the court, because, the police, the officials, the military people, the security people who caught up with them probably took, shall we say, strong measures to make sure that they didn't kill themselves or anything of that kind. And the fact is they didn't kill themselves. And the third point is the Russians have them. That is almost unique in my experience with these kind of attacks. The Russians have them. They've rolled up the entire network. They have that information. And we're now starting to get a whole set of comments from Putin, from Patrushev, Putin's national security advisor, from Bortnikov, the head of the FSB, from Peskov, from Medvedev, from Zakharova, all telling us the same thing, which is that they haven't concluded the investigation. They haven't joined up all the dots. They are carrying out interrogations. The people that they've caught, which is a large group, are talking. The investigation appears now to have extended to Turkey, and we have reason to believe the Turks and the Russians are working on this together. If there is a Ukrainian trace, and clearly that is at the back of everybody's minds in Moscow, they will find it. That's what they're telling us. Now, let's wait and see, but clearly that suspicion in Moscow is there, and the Russians have made it completely clear that if they do find a Ukrainian trace, and remember, these people were looking to escape towards Ukraine, that isn't really disputable. If they do find a Ukrainian trace involving Ukrainian officials, there will be severe consequences to pay, and Bortnikov, the FSB director, has made it quite clear that in that case, as far as the Russians are concerned, that also implicates the Americans and the British because they're Ukraine's backers. So, this is potentially a very, very big event. And I think we should look out and wait for some big news next week. So I just wanted to, start off with Crocus City Hall, because that is where we are. There's been a huge amount of, misleading commentary and discussion and information about this. The Western governments and Western intelligence agencies have been going out of their way to try to distance Ukraine and, by extension, themselves from this affair. The Russians have their suspicions. They seem to have grounds for those suspicions. We don't yet know what the final results of the investigation are going to be. Let's wait. I suspect that within a week, 10 days at most, the Russians will have come forward and told us what they think they know.
Yeah. The 48 hours, I think, can be explained with the Shaman concert. And we talked about this in a video, and I discussed this about four or 5 days ago. I forgot in a video that I made, because I saw some posts on Twitter X of people in Moscow who were saying that they went to the Shaman concert. I believe it was on the 9th or the 10th of March, and the security was very, very tight. And that kind of fits into the window of the 48-hour warning. And the speculation, and it's just speculation, is that because the security was so tight at the Shaman concert, which was at the same venue, the attack was pushed back to the next concert, which was the picnic concert. Anyway, that's speculation, but it does make sense. It fits into the 48-hour window, and there were a lot of people on Twitter some days ago who were basically saying, yeah, I was at that show in Moscow, and the security was very, very tight, because we're just talking about perhaps the most popular Russian singer at this moment. Anyway, let's...
Yeah, absolutely. But the point, just to
Yeah.
quickly say, is that concert passed, that happened at Crocus City Hall, and then there were no further warnings. And that's the key thing. There was no further
Correct.
warning that I am aware of that said, look, the situation is still dangerous and there needs to be a high alert status. Now, perhaps there were warnings, that might have been passed privately. But given that the public warning that the embassies gave was addressed to US and British citizens in Moscow, of which, by the way, there are quite a few still, that 48-hour period would have passed. Nothing happened. They might have said to themselves, there's no further warnings from the embassy. We can go back to living our normal lives. Maybe I'm overanalyzing this, but it does seem to me that this 48-hour window that this warning gave is an issue which ought to be at least explained or clarified. And in fact, if you go to all the commentary, all the discussion, even an article today by Seymour Hersh, I noticed, it's just not mentioned.
Yeah, that's not mentioned. The collective West stays away from the direction of travel of the terrorists in their white Renault that they were heading towards Ukraine. They don't mention any of that in their discussion of this terrorist attack. And actually, Kirby, when he gave the first press conference after the terrorist attack, he was asked by a reporter, does that warning given on March 7th, 8th have anything to do with this terrorist attack? And Kirby said, I want to consult with the State Department, but I don't think that the warning and this terrorist attack are related. He did say, I want to consult with the State Department, but he hinted at the fact that the warning and the terrorist attack had no connection. So you even have Kirby kind of saying that 48-hour warning and what happened in the terrorist attack, two separate things. Anyway, let's discuss what's going on the front lines. You have Zelensky touring Sumy. You had this huge missile strike, a Zircon missile strike, taking out this SBU office building for SBU Day in Kiev. You talked about Budanov trying to distance himself from the terrorist attack. You have the SBU head not trying to distance himself from the terrorist attack, which I find very odd. What's going on with the front line as well as with the intel agencies and how they're seeing the situation unfold? They must be getting very nervous.
They're getting very nervous. As I said, when you have Budanov saying one thing and the SBU head saying something completely different, that does beg questions. And as I said, it suggests to me enormous tension and factional infighting within Kiev itself. And I understand that the Zircon attack has the Ukrainians spooked. There were three Zircon missiles launched. Just to explain to people, Zircon is a hypersonic cruise missile with a very long range. Apparently, these missiles were launched from the Black Sea. They flew towards Kiev. This is a distance of around 800 kilometers. They reached Kiev in 6 minutes. So this is an idea of how fast these go. Apparently, it's something like 10 times the speed of sound. Because they travel so fast, they're covered by a plasma screen, which means that radio waves can't penetrate them, which means that they are, in fact, invisible to radars. The Ukrainians got some warning just a few seconds before they arrived, probably from, witnesses who must have, maybe heard the sound or seen something moving across the sky. 6 minutes or whatever it was, seconds rather, is nowhere near enough to clear desks, hide people, do anything of that kind. Certainly it's not possible to, shoot these things down. The Ukrainians lack the technology to do that. Nobody has it. And so the Ukrainians are spooked by it. And they're clearly scared by these Zircon attacks. And we've also had, comments from people like Dmytro Kuleba, the foreign minister. He's coming out begging again for more Patriot missile systems. Ukraine is now desperately short of air defense assets. So they're very, very spooked by the Zircon attack. And I suspect the West is, because, to be frank, they have no answer to this. I mean, this is a new technology. It's a completely new weapon system. Nobody has developed a counter to it up to this point. So far as we know, none exists, though the Russians claim that their new S-500 air defense system can shoot down hypersonic missiles. But, that is yet to be demonstrated. So they're very, very spooked by that. But, of course, it's not the only missile attack. Now, this is an important point to understand. Over the last couple of days, last 10 days or so, Ukraine has been subjected to the most intense period of bombing and missile strikes by the Russians that we have seen since the start of the war. And it is, full spectrum missile strikes, uranium-2 drone attacks, Zircon missile strikes that we just discussed, Kinzhal hypersonic missile strikes. This is a completely different technology, by the way. These are the Kinzhals are, let's say, they're a generation behind the Zircon, but they're still very, very powerful missiles. We've had massive missile strike in Chasiv Yar, frontline town, but apparently a bunker destroyed there, a deep underground bunker. Rumours that lots of NATO officers were killed. There's confirmation that a Polish general has died. Some people are saying that this Polish general was in that bunker and was actually killed. Who knows? It's, uncertain. Kharkiv, as of the time of making this program, is without electric power and has been for several days. Apparently, Odessa, Zaporozhye, also power outages. The Russians are no longer attacking just the connectors when they strike at the energy system. The attack on Kharkiv destroyed one of the actual power stations. So this is completely different. The Russians are now bombing Kharkiv with conventional bombs. These are not missiles. These are these new precision-guided bombs. We are seeing that these new big bombs, the Fab 3000s, are appearing on the scene. And, a huge set of missile and bomb strikes across Ukraine, which Ukraine is no longer able to counter. Its air defense system seems to be falling apart. The attacks on Kharkiv, so far as one can see, went by almost uncontested. The air defense system there was barely operating. There are still some air defense systems operating in Kiev, but there are reports that the Russians knocked out 2 more Patriot launchers in close to Kiev as well. Though the Russian Defense Ministry hasn't confirmed that. Now, as that is happening, a continuing situation on the front lines. Now, again, it's important to say we are now apparently, so I've been told, at the worst period of this spring mud season, the Rasputitsa. That began at the end of February. This is the period when the snow and the frost that's built up over the winter melts. That creates mud conditions. Apparently, we're now at the worst point of that. And that affects movement on the battlefronts. And yet the Russians are moving. And they're advancing west of Avdiivka, captured 2 more important villages. They're pushing and getting closer to capturing a town called Pervomaisky, near to Avdiivka. Even more importantly, they seem to be on the brink of launching an attack on Chasov Yar, the next big town, or at least the next town west of Bakhmut. And again, it looks like there's a hole being punched through the Ukrainian front lines. And more people are putting all this together. They're looking at the size of the Russian army that is building up. They're looking at these enormous missile and bomb strikes across Ukraine. They're noticing the areas where these missile and bomb strikes are being concentrated, and they seem to be concentrated in 3 areas: around Kharkiv city, around Odessa, and around the city of Zaporozhye, or the Dnieper. And there are now reports, rumors, fears that when the Rasputitsa period ends, the Russians are going to mount an offensive. And today, The Economist is warning about this, that a big Russian offensive is coming. And of course, we had just a few days ago Putin going out and saying that the Russians are moving beyond active defense, which looked like it might be a hint that some kind of an offensive was on the way. Now, we don't know that. It may be that the Russians are again playing mind games with us. They've done this many times, not just with us, but of course, first and foremost with the Ukrainians. They've been very successful at keeping everybody guessing. The advances on the ground, however, continue to happen, and the momentum looks unstoppable. Ukraine has no real reserves. They're trying to cobble together defenses in a hurry along the front lines, but this isn't the situation. This isn't analogous to the Surovikin line that we talked about, the one that the Russians built last year. I mean, when you actually look at the fortified positions the Ukrainians are building, I mean, the contrast is obvious, actually. And beyond that, the Russians have something which the Ukrainians last summer didn't: overwhelming air superiority, hypersonic and other types of missiles, overwhelming superiority in artillery. The whole situation is looking very bad, and across the West, growing nerves now about what might come in May or June, when the Russians might be ready for a big offensive when the ground hardens.
Yeah, The foreign minister of Ukraine said that the West needs to get Patriot air defense systems to Ukraine now. Right now, he said, get those damn Patriots to us. Are there any Patriots that the collective West can get to Ukraine?
No, I mean, this is. I mean, he's talking nonsense. He must know it. I mean, it's the kind of comment that smacks of desperation. But I mean, there's a major shortage of Patriot systems. The United States doesn't have that many of them. The Germans and the Dutch have basically used up their stockpiles of Patriots that they were sending to Ukraine. I mean, they don't have them. And what we've seen over the last few weeks is that the Russians can systematically destroy them. Shoigu, a few days ago, claimed that they'd already destroyed 5 since the start of the year. And that was before we got the reports that another 2 have been destroyed. The West, I think, is going to be very reluctant to part with more Patriot systems. Because all that happens, and this has been true of every single weapon system that has been sent to Ukraine, Western weapon system, is that they get burnt up incredibly fast.
Yeah. And Putin said that he's going to, the same is going to happen with F-16s. He said just like with the Leopard tanks and any other wonder weapons, any F-16s that enter into Ukraine, we're going to shoot those F-16s down. So that was also
a very important
that Putin made, yeah.
A very important comment made by Putin. He went to a facility which trains pilots for the Russian Air Force, actually helicopter pilots. But he said that if the F-16s come, he was always basically saying, bring them on, we'll shoot them down. But he also gave a warning. He said if they operate from bases in Romania and Poland, he didn't name the countries, but if they work from those kind of bases, we will attack those bases. And he's demonstrated, the Russians have demonstrated, that they have hypersonic Zircon missiles that can penetrate any defenses. So
he's very concerned about the nuclear part of the F-16s. Yeah.
I know, yeah, absolutely. Which is, he said, that we know that F-16s are designed to carry nuclear weapons. So, and of course, in a NATO base, conceivably, there might be nuclear weapons there. So, this is raising the stakes. The whole F-16 saga, by the way, looks like a complete debacle. There was an article, I think it was in Politico, it might have been somewhere else, saying that it was all descending into chaos. Only 12 pilots had been trained to fly these things. The training that they've been provided is of a basic nature, so they might not be up to taking on the Russians. The infrastructure to operate these F-16s in Ukraine itself basically doesn't exist. The airfields that the Ukrainians would be using get repeatedly attacked by the Russians. This is a tricky aircraft to operate. I mean, no doubt some of them could be put up in the air. The Russians are now warning, just as they did with the Taurus missiles, that if they're launched from, what Putin said about a week ago, 10 days ago, he said, if missiles strike Russian territory, Western supplied missiles strike Russian territory, people should remember that we have missiles that can reach the territories of Western states also. He gave that warning. And now he's made a very similar and very strong warning about the F-16s. And as I said, he has that capability. He can do that. And we now see that the Danes apparently are backtracking. They are saying that they're not going to supply additional F-16s to Ukraine beyond the ones that they'd previously committed to supplying. And one gets the sense that, again, people are starting to get cold feet about a plan that was never really properly thought through. Like everything else.
Always follow the... Yeah, I was going to say, always follow the money. And it does look like the collective West is getting very nervous. It does look like they're trying to walk many of the claims that they made about sending wonder weapons to defeat the Russians and F-16s and boots on the ground. They're definitely scaling a lot of that rhetoric back. That's the way it looks, but no reverse gear. We always have to remember that. They have no reverse gear. So at the moment, it does look like the collective West and even the Europeans are backtracking on various comments. And of course, follow the money. And the 5 billion that they were looking to seize, some people say steal, I don't know, but the 5 billion in interest in profits from the 300 billion, or to be more precise, the 200 billion that is being held at Euroclear, it looks like the Europeans are even finding the seizing of this 5.5 billion to be very problematic. In my analysis, I think it's theft.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. I'm no expert, but stealing the interest or the profits of an asset, to me, is theft. But what do I know? Anyway, Alexander, what's going on with this story?
What do I know? Because I would have agreed with you. Now, the head of Euroclear has said that seizing the capital would be theft. And she came out and spoke up very strongly about that. But she said that taking the interest would not be so bad because technically it belongs to Euroclear. It doesn't belong to the Russians. I don't get that at all, by the way. Maybe there's some contractual provision I don't understand. But it's looking controversial. And what they've discovered, what the Europeans have suddenly discovered, is that the Russians can bring legal cases, legal claims, in all kinds of jurisdictions that are outside Western control, because Euroclear operates in many places, including Hong Kong, including Singapore, including places like that. So, they're now getting extremely cold feet. And the fear is that, if there's judgments in the Hong Kong courts, say, or the Singapore courts, local divisions of Euroclear might suddenly find themselves frozen with assets being taken out of Euroclear, which could bring about the complete collapse of Euroclear, because Euroclear can only function if it is a global system. And of course, the problem it has is that to the extent that it is a global depository, a couple of years ago, 5-10 years ago, Euroclear and the other one, Clearview, the two European ones, were the only two big global depositories. They were absolutely part of the international financial system. Now, there are other depositories. China has one. Russia has one. So if people want to park their money, they can do it in other depositories as well. So this is spooking them out. And of course, the justification they're giving for not seizing this 5 billion in interest is hilarious. They're saying they need that money in case the Russians bring legal action. They need the money to cover the fees.
It says it all.
Yeah.
I mean, they know that they're stealing the money, and that's why they want to put some of this money aside in order to deal with the legal fault. It's crazy.
Yes.
It's absolutely beyond belief that they're even still talking about this. They should just put this to bed. They should say, we're not going to steal anything. End of story. It's over. We're not going to steal 300 billion. We're not going to steal the interest. We're not going to touch it. You can trust us, world. You can trust us with your money. That's what they should come out and say.
Absolutely. I mean, to be frank, there's already been damage done simply by bringing up this whole issue. It should never have been brought up at all. Of course, there was also a huge amount of damage done in February 2022 when they froze the Russian central bank's assets. I mean, that was already a major mistake and has been acknowledged to be such. But talking about seizing the assets, actually confiscating them, stealing them, in the way that you say, I mean, that was beyond reckless. It was frankly stupid. And, they're now coming up against the fundamental problem that there is no legal way around this. You can come up with all kinds of elaborate legal theories, but none of those legal theories make sense or are likely to cut any ice with a genuinely independent court. Now, courts, as we've seen in the West, tend to follow the line that Western governments take. Courts elsewhere in the world, Hong Kong, Singapore, might not do so.
Countries.
BRICS countries.
BRICS. I think Dubai as well is one of those.
Dubai,
clearing,
absolutely.
I think
absolutely.
So,
might not
that's
do
two BRICS. Two BRICS countries
Absolutely.
right there.
Absolutely. They might not do so.
Why wouldn't they vote in favor? Why wouldn't they vote in favor, rule in favor of Russia?
Well, it did. Well, why wouldn't they? If the law says, that they can.
Yeah, yeah. It's an incredible development. It really is. But just one final point. Back in 2022, when they were freezing the Russian frozen assets, at that point in time, they thought that the Russian economy would collapse. They would get into Russia. They would plunder Russia's resources. They would balkanize Russia. And whatever frozen assets stories that were frozen asset fear that was being sent out to the world, it would all be made good by the fact that they would have gotten into Russia and stolen everything inside of Russia and balkanized Russia, and unipolar moment would have remained with us, and there would be no problems. They never expected Russia to beat off the economic war. That was the difference in 2022 than what they're talking about now with stealing the 300 billion or the interest of the 300
Absolutely.
billion.
If you doubt that, go to the White House website, go through all the various things there, dial all the way back to February 2022. You still find it there on the White House website. I wonder for how much longer, by the way. But there is a briefing given by a anonymous US White House official, Jake Sullivan, perhaps? Just saying. But anyway, an anonymous White House official, directly after the announcement that the Russian central bank's assets had been frozen. And he says it all out very simply. He says, the plan is we're going to set out to seize these assets. That will cause the ruble to go into free fall. That will lead in turn to the collapse of the Russian banking system. It will put the Russian central bank in an impossible position because they won't be able to support the ruble. They won't know how to support the banking system in Russia. And that will create a major financial economic collapse in Russia. It's all there. Just go back whilst it's still there, find that briefing by that anonymous official. If it's gone, well, you can dial back and look at the various commentaries and discussions we were doing on the Duran and on my channel. Then you will find that I discussed that briefing very thoroughly in one of my videos, or at least I think actually we did it in one of our videos too. So they're all there. It's there. It's all set up. It was clearly explained at the time, and it didn't happen. Nothing happened. I mean, there was a wobble. The central bank raised interest rates to 20%. They took steps to stabilize the banking system, which was pretty solid in Russia. Within weeks, the Russians had absorbed the blow. And that was something they did not expect. I mean, it was completely not what they thought would happen. And you're absolutely right. They didn't think that there would be any legal comeback from the freezing of the assets because they thought that the whole Russian economy would implode and that the government would fall and that, they'd then be able to dictate terms and everybody around the world would be terrified of them and their overwhelming power that they'd brought the Russians to heel. And it didn't turn out that way. And another utterly forgotten story, by the way, just following from this, is that by freezing the reserve, when that didn't work, over the next few weeks and months, they started working towards declaring Russia in default because the Russians weren't able to use dollars to pay their bonds. They prevented payment of the bonds. The Russians then started paying for the bonds in rubles, and the creditors accepted the rubles. So that didn't happen either. and Russia is not in default.
They really wanted to destroy Russia. I mean, they really had it all planned out, the destruction of Russia. And just a final point, remember Biden's State of the Union in 2022. The ruble is rubble.
That's right.
There's a reason that they put that into his speech. That didn't age so well. The ruble is rubble didn't.
No. But it's all there. I mean, whatever people may say, they were absolutely straightforward about what they intended to do at the time. There are public statements about it. As I said, when I say it's still there on the White House website. It was still there when I last looked, which is a couple of weeks ago. But of course, what's happened since then, I don't know. But this has been a disastrous debacle. It's been the biggest defeat of all. The defeat on the battle lines the defeat of Ukraine's offensive last summer was another big blow. But the biggest blow of all was the failure of the sanctions. And we've discussed this about the state of the Russian economy today. We had a long discussion, Glenn Deason and I, with the economist Michael Hudson. That should be coming up soon, I think. But the point is that we've now had commentary by Elvira Nabiullina, the Russian central bank chair, and she's incredulous about how fast the economy is growing. She says there's an investment boom, wages are rising, consumer confidence is strong, business activity is rising, the economy is being transformed. This despite the fact that I've raised interest rates and inflation is falling. It doesn't, she almost says, I can't compute this. This is happening beyond my own expectations.
She did a great job.
Well,
she did a great job.
She did a great job. Yeah, she did. She did. Absolutely. She deserves a Nobel. She deserves a Nobel Prize for economics because the success has been astonishing.
At the end of the day, Alexander, it's about people, and we've made this comment a bunch of times. Look at the people leading the collective West, and look at the people in Russia. We did it. We said it in the live stream. I believe David Sachs said it in the live stream we did the other day as well. You look at the people in the leadership position in the collective West, and Jacques Spad said it too. These are the people that are going to bring down. These people actually thought they're going to destroy and bring down the Russian Federation. That is being led by people like Putin and Nabiullina and Lavrov and Shoigu and Medvedev and Zakharov.
No. Anyway, they did.
It was never going to happen.
They did, and here we are. So now, as I said, we need to wait for two big things. Firstly, what the Russians are going to say about Crocus City Hall, and they're going to say it quickly. Again, just to reiterate, it is, I think, all but unique that 4 gunmen, Islamist gunmen, after an event and a terrorist attack of this kind, have been captured so fast. That the Russians were able to capture these people. There's been lots of criticisms about failures by Russian security and intelligence services. Their speed in capturing these people is remarkable. And, that ought to be acknowledged too. They might have made mistakes, I'm not saying they didn't, but they also have done something which Western security and intelligence agencies have struggled to do, which is capture all the 4 gunmen, capture the entire network that supported them, and they're carrying out an investigation, and very soon they will give us the conclusions of that investigation. Now, we might agree, we might disagree, but whatever the Russians come up with, it could easily be momentous, and if they blame Ukraine or say that Ukraine was implicated, that will be momentous, and we'll see what the Russian response is. And of course, we've also got all of this fear now that a big Russian offensive is coming in May.
Let me ask you one final question. In your opinion, do you think it was a mistake, and it remains a mistake for the U.S. to continue to state that Ukraine has absolutely no involvement in this terrorist attack, or to state that so quickly as well, to come out with that statement so quickly? I mean, I know that the Russian officials are coming out and they're saying that that the U.S. came out with this statement that Ukraine has no involvement in the terror attack within a few hours of the attack. Before Russia had even begun investigating the attack, the U.S. was already claiming that Ukraine has no involvement. And I say that because if I was advising the Biden White House on this situation, I would have said, don't come out with a statement. Just say that you send your condolences, condemn the terrorist attack, send your condolences to the Russian people and the Russian government. Say that you're going to do whatever you can as the United States to help them apprehend the terrorists. That would have been a smart statement to have come out with, and leave it there.
I think it's a big mistake, actually. I absolutely do. Preempting an investigation, when the Russians started talking about Ukraine, it might have been justified to say, we don't believe Ukraine was involved. We have no reason up to now to think that. But to come out and say categorically, Ukraine was not involved, as you rightly say, the attack was underway, or rather the aftermath of the attack was still underway. And, whilst before the investigation has announced its results, I think that was a big mistake. Zakharova has actually said that they backed themselves into a corner over this. And I think she might be right on this one, actually, because I wonder whether the US started making statements about this, who was responsible for this affair, without expecting that the Russians would capture the perpetrators. And because, the assumption always is that with these kind of attacks, if they have an Islamist origin, the perpetrators will be killed. They'll either commit suicide or they'll go down fighting, but they won't allow themselves to be taken alive. Remember, as I said, I'm not going to say it's unprecedented, but it is extremely unusual following an attack like this for perpetrators like this to survive them. I mean, sometimes, I believe this is correct, they actually go wearing suicide vests into these kind of attacks. So perhaps the US expected that, and now they've been taken by surprise by the fact that these people were caught, and having issued those denials right at the beginning, they're now becoming more and more strident because they're becoming very nervous that the investigation the Russians are undertaking might produce a different result. And they want to have they want to shape opinion before the results of that investigation appear. Just saying.
I agree. All right, we will end it there. The Duran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, Odyssey, BitChute, Telegram, Rockfin, and Twitter X. And go to the Duran shop. Take care.